I almost lost my home because of sunlight. That's not a joke, not a metaphor. My neighbor, who also happened to be the HOA president, decided that my house got the better light and demanded I swap with her. When I refused, she called 911 and painted me as some kind of dangerous man with a weapon. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just dealing with a crazy neighbor. I was trapped in a war I never signed up for. 6 months before all this, I thought I'd found peace. I'd finally bought my first house, a small place with a yard I actually loved taking care of. Every morning I'd step outside, coffee in hand, still in pajama pants, and water the lawn. That quiet rhythm, it felt like sanctuary. Then came Karen. She stormed onto my driveway like she owned the block, cheetah print robe, oversized sunglasses, slippers dragging on the concrete. She pointed at my house like it had personally offended her. "You think you can just steal the good sunlight?" she barked. At first, I thought she was joking. I laughed nervously, hose dangling in my hand. Then she dropped the bomb. "We're swapping houses. You move into mine, I'll take this one. It's only fair. I've lived here 30 years. I blinked, thinking maybe I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" She doubled down. Said her house got too much afternoon sun. Mine had the gentle morning light, and she had seniority in the neighborhood. She actually expected me to sign over my home because her humors didn't like the heat. I told her no, firm, but calm. That's when she exploded. "You people never respect the order around here. You can't just say no to me. I'm calling the police." And she did. Right there, she dialed 911 and started crying into the phone, putting on this award-worthy performance. She told the dispatcher I was aggressive, threatening her, waving a weapon, my garden hose. My stomach dropped. I knew how dangerous that call could be. So I pulled out my phone and started recording. When the cops arrived, she ran at them, trembling, finger pointed at me, sobbing about how terrified she was. I stayed calm. I showed the officers my phone, explained I'd just been watering my lawn, and handed over the recording. One cop sighed like he'd seen this all before. They gave her a warning about abusing 911, told her sunlight wasn't a legal basis for stealing someone's house, and left. But before she went back inside, Karen hissed at me. "This isn't over. I've got a lawyer." A few days later, a man showed up at my door. Short, sweaty, cheap suit, greasy hair, plastered back. He puffed out his chest and introduced himself as my neighbor's legal representative. He shoved a pile of papers at me, something called a deed of benevolent exchange. It was a mess of fake legalese, demanding I let his client do a pre-possession inspection of my home. Translation, she wanted to walk through my house and plan how to redecorate after stealing it. I just stared at him, recorded the whole thing, and finally told him no. "Get off my porch before I call the cops." He stuffed his fake documents back in his briefcase and ran off, but not before sputtering that I'd be hearing from them again. That was just the beginning. A few mornings later, I found a piece of paper taped to my door in Comic Sans font. Official eviction notice. According to this masterpiece, under the Good Neighbor Statute of 1978, I had 72 hours to vacate. It wasn't even signed by a judge, just her nephew's loopy handwriting. The absurdity almost made me laugh, but it was also terrifying. Because while it was fake, the harassment wasn't. Soon, my sprinklers were mysteriously aimed at my own windows. My trash was knocked over and smeared with condiments. Packages disappeared. Each time I logged it, took photos, saved evidence. But the constant pressure wore me down. Nights I'd sit inside, blinds closed, wondering if it was worth it. Maybe I should just sell the place, cut my losses, and leave. That thought tasted bitter in my mouth. I'd worked too hard for this home. Why should I be the one to run? That's when I called my family. My older brother's a contractor. My younger sister's a paralegal. They showed up like cavalry. My brother walked the perimeter of Karen's house and immediately spotted cracks in her foundation sagging in the roofline. "That place is falling apart," he muttered. My sister dug into records and social media. Within hours, she uncovered the truth. Karen's lawyer was actually her nephew, a law school dropout who'd failed the bar exam 3 times. That's when it clicked. Karen wasn't just entitled, she was desperate. Her house was a structural nightmare, probably unsafe to live in, and she was trying to dump it on me. The sunlight story was just the cover. We came up with a plan. My sister said we could warn them, send a cease and desist. Or, we go nuclear. I chose something in between. I wanted leverage. The next time her nephew showed up letter in hand threatening to sue me for sunlight hoarding, I opened the door recording and tore him apart. I told him I knew he wasn't a lawyer. I knew he'd failed the bar. I had videos, fake notices, even this ridiculous letterhead from the made-up law offices of Barnaby Finch. He turned pale. I made him say it on camera, admit he wasn't a lawyer. Then I leaned in and gave him the deal his aunt would pay for a full structural inspection of her own home by an engineer I chose, and I'd get a copy of the report. Or else I'd hand everything to the DA and let him rot for fraud. He stammered, begged, but I didn't blink. 24 hours later, he came back with a scribbled note in Karen's handwriting. I agree to your terms. The inspection was brutal. For hours, the engineer combed through her place. My brother watched from my living room window, muttering under his breath every time the inspector shook her head or snapped a photo. When the report arrived, it was 30 pages of disaster. The load-bearing wall in her living room had been removed years ago and replaced with a beam far too weak. The entire house was sagging under its own weight. Water damage had seeped into the walls, sprouting black mold. The electrical system looked like a kid's science project wires twisted together with tape-overloaded circuits everywhere. The conclusion was blunt: the house was unsafe for human habitation. Risk of collapse. Fire hazard. Toxic mold exposure. Reading it felt like a punch in the gut. This wasn't just a bad neighbor trying to steal something nice. She was willing to trick me into moving into a death trap. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It felt like attempted fraud with a side of attempted murder by real estate. The engineering firm was obligated to report. Within days, a city inspector rolled up in a white van, binder in hand. He knocked, presented a warrant, and went inside. I watched from my window as Karen flailed, trying to block him. Didn't matter. For 3 hours, he tore through her place crawlspace to attic writing notes. When he came out, he hammered a red sign onto her door: unsafe for human habitation. Do not enter. By order of the city. The sound of those nails hitting wood might have been the most satisfying sound I've ever heard. Karen stood frozen on her lawn, sunglasses off for once, her face gray and sagging like her house. Her nephew showed up wild-eyed and they started screaming at each other. He blamed her for being too cheap to fix the problems. She blamed him for pretending to be a lawyer. The two of them howled back and forth while the neighborhood watched. Their alliance cracked apart right there on the grass. That night, a moving truck came. They carried out a few boxes, heads hung low, and drove off. They didn't look at me once. The house sat empty after that, a condemned shell with a red sign nailed to the front like a scarlet letter. That was how the war ended. Not with me giving up my home, not with another fake notice, but with her empire of lies collapsing in broad daylight. And here's what I learned: sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to stand your ground, document everything, and wait for the truth to crush them.